So, what is the difference between a prenuptial agreement and a postnuptial agreement? Is one type of agreement better than the other? Which one should you choose? Hi, I'm Sergio Cabanas, managing attorney of divorce and mediation law firm right here in Florida. Thank you for joining me today. Today's question is, Sergio, I've heard so much about these prenuptial agreements and postnuptial agreements when it comes to marriages and divorces, but what exactly do these agreements do, and what's the difference between a prenuptial agreement and a postnuptial agreement? Well, basically, both agreements address how assets are to be divided in the event of a divorce. It could also address whether any alimony will be paid, and if so, how much and for how long. So what's the difference between a prenuptial agreement and a postnuptial agreement? Well, the difference is that a prenuptial agreement is signed and finalized before the wedding, whereas a postnuptial agreement is made after the wedding. That might seem obvious, but why do some people choose to do a prenuptial agreement versus a postnuptial agreement? First, a prenuptial agreement is one that's made before the wedding, and it's usually when one or both spouses already have assets that they want to protect in the event of divorce, or they're expecting to have assets later on during the marriage that they want to protect. For example, one of the spouses may be expecting an inheritance, or maybe some other type of windfall, such as from a settlement or a lawsuit. So why would anybody do a postnuptial agreement? Well, that usually comes up under one of two circumstances. The first circumstance is that one of the parties want to enter into a prenuptial agreement, but because of time constraints, they weren't able to finalize a prenuptial agreement before the wedding. If the parties rush into a prenuptial agreement too close to a wedding date, it runs the risk of being invalidated if the court believes that one of the parties was coerced in order to sign the agreement due to time constraints. So under these circumstances, the parties may agree to simply execute a postnuptial agreement after the wedding to avoid these time constraints and avoid the risk of it being invalidated. Of course, you run the risk that one of the parties may refuse to sign any agreement after the wedding, so just keep that in mind. The second set of circumstances through which the parties may later decide to do a postnuptial agreement is because they thought that the marriage was going well at first and they didn't anticipate divorce. But they hit a few bumps in the road during the marriage, and now they're starting to consider the possibility of divorce. But even in that situation, one or both spouses may want to hold off on divorce. Maybe they're trying to do a reconciliation, or perhaps they're holding off for other reasons, such as for immigration purposes, or children, or for business ventures, or maybe some other type of financial reason. So if you have a valid prenuptial agreement or a valid postnuptial agreement, the divorce could be an easier process because the parties have already agreed to the terms and conditions of the divorce. Just keep in mind that the parties can negotiate just about everything, except Florida law does not allow the parties to pre-negotiate the issues relating to children, such as time sharing, custody or child support, etc. So if you're thinking about having a valid prenuptial or postnuptial agreement, contact us today for your free case evaluation. I hope this short video provided you at least some guidance over the differences between a prenuptial and postnuptial agreement and how to go about getting it done and doing it right. Of course, this is not a substitute for an actual consultation with an attorney who can review the specifics of your case and give you the appropriate applicable advice. Thank you again for joining me today, and as always, stay informed so you can stay strong.